see. Can everyone hear me OK?
Yes.
Excellent. So, my name is Justin Mayer. I am originally from Los Angeles, California. Just 3 months ago, I moved actually here to Trentino. So I live on a mountaintop, just half an hour away from here. Really loving the nature and being here. I build web applications for the healthcare industry and also for things related to security and privacy. My latest project is Fortressa, which is a tool that allows you to build your own self-contained VPN. In my spare time, I manage a tool, a static site generator called Pelican. And what I want to talk about today is for those of us who spend time around data. I feel like it's really important that we treat that data with a lot of care. It's oftentimes can be hundreds of thousands or millions of records, and the best way for us to keep that data secure is to make sure that our individual systems and our servers and other things that touch that data are secure. So I'm going to be going a little fast. I have a lot of material to cover. I apologize. I'm also going to infuse some of my personal views on privacy and surveillance capitalism, so my apologies in advance. So the issue that a lot of us are seeing now is that there's a lot of security breaches and, more importantly, a lot of data breaches. And that a lot of times this data is breached accidentally. Sometimes it's not so accidental and it's more a business model. But this is becoming very worrisome. And this data, personally identifiable information, can be birth dates, tax ID numbers, street addresses, email addresses, employment information, income data, all kinds of different things. And that's just the textual data. There's facial recognition, fingerprints, iris scans. There's location data, all of the places that we go every day with this tracking device in our pockets. So this data ends up in places you don't expect. So it inevitably asks the question, well, have I been owned or pwned, or however you pronounce that? And the answer is, yeah, you probably have been. And there's a site where you can go there and you can put in your email address. And these are examples of one email address I put in, and I found that it was, these were breaches of just the one email address that I put in there. So what can we do about this? One thing that we can do is try to anonymize the data. The problem that we found in some of the things that we were doing is it's really hard to anonymize data and feel confident that you've done a good job at sanitizing everything. There's so many ways to tie pieces of information together and identify someone that what we've been doing is instead we've been just faking the data. We just generate data instead of trying to scrub and sanitize and anonymize. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you can't fake it, and you need to keep some semblance of the original data together in order to analyze it. And if you need to do that, talk to someone who does this for a living. I think that she had to leave, but Catherine Jarmel, who was here yesterday, she's working on this concept of anonymizing. So if that interests you, I encourage you to reach out to her. So one of the other things that we can do to protect the data as it flows is to use virtual private networks. And why is that important? We're constantly connecting to untrusted networks, whether it's a conference, whether it's a hotel room, an airplane, an airport, sometimes even your own house, your ISP. Can you really trust your ISP? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But a VPN means you don't have to. The problem with VPNs is that generally commercial providers have an incentive to record your data, to store it forever, to sell it to whoever will pay them the most money. And so people ask me, what should I do about that? And so I really didn't have a good answer, and so I built something. And so I built Fortressa, which is in turn built on something else called Algo. Algo is a piece of open source software. But the problem is you need to know how to use a terminal, and you need to spend the time to do it. And so I wanted someone to be able to go to a website, choose where they want their VPN and get it. So if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to check it out. Another thing that's important is encrypting data at rest. For workstations, that can be full disk encryption, like on a Mac, for example, like this one. File Vault will take care of that. If you're on Linux, you would probably use Lux. The setup is usually just a checkbox. I want to encrypt my drive, and that's the beginning and the end of it. When you're talking about a server environment, it's a little more complicated. This is a link to a full disk encryption tutorial for Linode, just to choose one cloud provider. And you have to sort of circumvent the way that the cloud provider works, because when you boot your operating system, you have to enter in a password to decrypt the drive so that it can continue the boot process. And so this makes things really clunky in a server environment. You don't want to have to be sitting next to your terminal, when a server is maybe forcibly rebooted in order to put in the password so that all your services come back up. So this can be tricky, and it's in some ways a little less important. It's much easier to lose a computer or a phone than it is for someone to go into a data center and steal a drive from a secured data center. There's many other things that you can do. This link is for, and by the way, you don't have to write any of this stuff down. I provide the slides so you don't have to copy everything. So this is a link to a surveillance self-defense guide that EFF produces. It's really useful. I recommend it. Talking for a moment about the web, both in terms of the consumption, when you're using the web, and also on the production side for any of you who do anything related to publishing or putting something on the web. I highly recommend that folks give Firefox a try if you don't already use it. Partly because I really want them to survive, and it's really important. They're the only browser, independent browser maker that's not tied to some other business. Apple makes one to support their hardware. Google makes one to support their ad model, and I don't know why Microsoft makes one. But it's also a great browser, so I recommend trying it. The problem I have with Chrome is there's a bit of a moral hazard issue, because they're in the business of selling your data, and you are feeding them that data via their browser. So just something to think about. These are some tools that I use when I'm just to try to keep my browsing experience a little safer. There's ad blocking. There's tools that allow you to modify sites' behavior that are more friendly with what you want to do. Then you've got the anti-ad block killer. It's sort of an escalating war. There's a tool that I use on macOS that allows you to record cookies, because a lot of times if you just turn all cookies off, everything breaks. The entire web will just stop working. This allows those cookies to be recorded, but then periodically just purges them. So I find that a useful tool. And there's other tools for other browsers and other operating systems that allow you to filter out a lot of the ad tracking that I find so objectionable. And this is another useful link for for Firefox configuration for privacy freaks like me who decide that I need to spend way too much time on this sort of thing. If you ever find yourself, as I often do, needing to send a file to someone, it's hilarious to me that in 2018 it's so hard to find a secure, easy way to send a file. But thankfully, Firefox actually has a pilot laboratory project that does this really well. You can go to send.firefox.com, upload a file, it encrypts it, stores it somewhere where even Mozilla can't access it, and then when someone taps the link that you send them, it then downloads the file, burns it on the server side, and it's then decrypted on the client side on the other end. So really handy. Sometimes you don't want to send a file, but you want to send just a bit of text. Sometimes it's a password. This happens to me all the time. I have some remote coworker, and I need to give them a new password that I generated for a Postgres database. This site is great for that. One-time secret. You just put in your password, generate it, send them the link. Same basic concept. They get the contents of that password. They can put it in their password manager, and the information is destroyed. On the hardware side, you might want to check out something called Librem by a company called Purism. They're based in California. They make 13-inch and 15-inch models of notebooks. They're also working on a phone. But they're really focused on security and privacy, like crazily focused on it. They even go so far as to put hardware kill switches right on the front of the machine, like right above the keyboard. There are switches to kill the microphone, camera, all of the wireless. It's really cool stuff. On the software side, take a look at Qubes. Qubes does this really interesting compartmentalization where it will take an environment and say, like, okay, this is my web browsing environment, this is my banking environment, and they are completely isolated from one another. There's no way for your web browsing environment to access any of the data, say, in your finance or web banking environment. Decentralization and federation is sort of one of my passion topics. And when the internet started, like things were decentralized. You had email servers, you had Usenet, if anyone remembers Usenet. All of these different things that were meant to talk to one another, but to survive if one or more nodes went down. And then, of course, we decided that that's a bad idea, and we should have everything be consolidated in one, usually a company, right? So we've got now Facebook and Twitter and Google, et cetera. So I'm trying to get us back to this notion of decentralizing a lot of those things. We've already talked about one category. Instead of using a centralized VPN, you can create your own. But what are some other ones? So instead of using Dropbox to synchronize files from between different machines or between other people, you can use a Golang-based tool called SyncThing. Open source, really fast, low CPU and memory utilization. I've been using it for the last few years, and I think it's great. Instead of using GitHub or Bitbucket, think about installing your own GitLab instance. I've done this, and these docs allow you to take a VPS and configure it with your own GitLab instance that's not managed or controlled by anyone else in just a real short period of time. A lot of people think that hosting your own email is insane, and I've given a variation of this talk, and people have come up afterward and said, like, you can't actually be suggesting that we host our own email. I really am, and I do it, and it's really not hard. As a matter of fact, I use Mail-in-a-Box, for example, and I set that server up once a few years ago, and I haven't even touched it since. And it automatically updates itself and takes care of all the things that I need it to do. For chat, like, yeah, okay, everyone uses Slack. Slack's now this big, vortex that everyone has been sucked into. But you don't have to go along with that. You can set up your own instance of, you can go to matrix.org or Zulip Chat or umpteen others, and you can set up your own instance. So that's just live chat. We've got, I, for example, don't share a lot of my information on Facebook and Twitter just because I don't really trust either of those companies, and I don't really believe in what they're doing either. Just in terms of, I feel like many times they're making the world a worse place rather than a better place. So Mastodon is something, if you aren't familiar with it, that allows you to either join an existing instance or create your own. So I'm working, for the last few weeks, I've been working to create my own instance of Mastodon so that I can share information with my friends, family, and just know that it's not going to be data mined and sold to whoever's going to pay the most money. This has a number of positive effects, and it can't be centralized. If an instance goes down, there's hundreds of other ones available. I'm just going to mention this in passing. I'm assuming everyone knows what Let's Encrypt is, but if you're doing anything related to the web, all browsers now will display an insecure warning if you try to do anything over plain HTTP as of, I think, last month. So that's pretty much a requirement now for doing anything that's web related. Passwords are everywhere. They are terrible. There are ways of trying to make sure that people enter in strong passwords. Some tools that I found useful, if you use Django at all, this will allow you to see which passwords are already exist in these public breach dumps. So if someone tries to put in that password, you can make your service say, you need to use a different password because that one already exists in one of these publicly available dumps. You can run your site through this service, and it will tell you like what kinds of security issues might you have, what kinds of privacy issues might you have. Like I ran a few sites to this that I publish, and I was surprised to see how many. I was like, oh, okay, I use that many CDNs, and I have like that many JavaScript files that are being propagated and could potentially be an attack vector. It was really useful for me, so you might want to take a look at that. If you don't have multi-factor authentication available to you at the banks that you use or other important services that you care about, start complaining. Start telling your banks, start telling your other sites you use that you want real multi-factor authentication. And I say real because SMS to me is not real. It is too easy to hijack. It's too easy to compromise. Many people will say, oh yeah, but it's better than nothing. Well, that's kind of a low bar, right? Like we're shooting for just better than nothing. I mean, there's already better things out there. There's TOTP, which is time-based one-time passwords. You've probably seen where you get a 6-digit number, you enter it in. This is much more secure, still has good usability. You've probably seen it on GitHub and other sites like that. Hardware keys, I really love hardware keys. They're starting to catch on. The one that that used to be called U2F, and the successor to U2F or a universal second factor. The new standard is called WebAuthentication or WebAuthn, this is going to be really cool. Like having this little USB key, it's tiny. Like this one, for example, I have one. You can't even see it as it comes out of your computer. It's almost like it's integrated, and this provides better security than anything else out there. Better than SMS, better than TOTP, and I highly recommend if you do anything related to the web. Implementing this for your users, because this is really the best way to protect the data that you interact with. If you want to kind of start playing with this now, there's a great, and you use Django, there's a tool called Django U2F where you get both TOTP and U2F in the same package. I did a lightning talk at DjangoCon a couple of months ago in Heidelberg, and the link is on my website. And in 5 minutes during that lightning talk, I took a fresh Django instance and I configured it for TOTP and U2F multi-factor authentication and I did it live too, which was probably stupid, but it actually worked. So that was really cool. So this is sort of my call to action, and that's that the data that we interact with is really sensitive. It's really important that we protect it. And the best way that we can do that is by securing our own workstations, securing the servers that we administer, securing the sites that we use to publish data, and just being as vocal as you can with the sites you use, and if you have the ability to influence decisions at your company, I encourage you to try to get folks to be a little bit more excited about these things. So we can do better, but only if we take an active interest in actually doing that, both for ourselves and all of the other people, the data that we control and the friends and family that we care about. So I would love to talk to you more about this. If you have any interest in the hundreds of things that I think I covered in 15 minutes, please come up and find me. I'd love to talk about it. And thanks very much for coming.
Okay, thank you for the talk. Is there any question?
What do you think about DuckDuckGo as a search engine? And also Proton Mail as a...
Sure. So I really like DuckDuckGo. I've been using it as my primary search engine for a while. I'm often less than thrilled about the results sometimes. Depending if I want to know, like, if I type in, I don't know, Karl Marx, and I can see, okay, first result is the Wikipedia entry, great. It's good for that sort of search. Other times, if I want to know more about, how to implement web authentication using Django or something really more specific, often the results aren't as good. But what they're doing and the goals that they have in terms of like not tracking, and that's not their business model. So I think that's really important, and so that's why I use them as my main browser. I don't really know much about Proton Mail, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about that one. But anytime a company, if their business model is about using your data to do things, then I'm not usually very excited about it. So DuckDuckGo is trying to take a different approach, which I think is great. They just took $10 million in venture capital this week, so that may change, but hopefully not. What other questions do you have? I'm sure there must be something.
Justin, you showed a lot of references, web addresses and so on. Will you make your slides public?
Yes. The moment I take my microphone off, I will push a button and it will, if you go to justinmayer.com and then justinmayer.com/talks, that's where it will be in approximately 60 seconds after I take my mic off.
Okay, thank you.
So with the two-factor authentication, I'm finding that that's becoming more and more prevalent. And as a result, I have all kinds of SMS and other things. And one of the questions that I've been wondering about is why isn't the second factor by default the device? And just say that, OK, if this is my laptop, I've authenticated it. And so all I need is then my password to my laptop, and I don't need to do anything else. What are the issues with that?
Well, I think the main issue is, as is often the case, is one of standardization. So it would require that all the folks that make hardware agree to some standard in order to do this. And up until now, that's just not how it's been. Hardware manufacturers have simply not been able to agree on a single standard for using any particular piece of hardware or protocol to provide confirmed authentication and identity. I think that web authentication is the best thing we have to help make that more of a reality. The form that it currently takes is generally in a small USB device, but there's no reason that it has to remain in USB form. This could remain. This could take the form of something else that's integrated into a phone, that's integrated into a computer. So the pieces are already there. It's now just up to the folks that make these devices to actually implement those things, and I hope that they will.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. This was the last talk, the last day of the conference. There are still the lightning talks in the other room. So thank you, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.